It's this simple. God set up the rules. He created people because he says he wanted relationship with them, to be glorified through them, to receive glory from them, which is also really sick. And for that cause, he's going to create a system that puts most people that have ever lived for all time in hell forever. You believe this, you're okay with this, you're making excuses for it, and it's more offensive to me than just about any secular thing I've ever seen or heard in my entire life. I want to focus on one particular comment today. This is an individual who left a really long comment. Looks like they come from a pretty fundamentalist background. And this will probably hurt my case a little bit because what a lot of you have done is said, Brandon, you came from fundamentalism. You were part of this cult. You're so brainwashed that when you finally figured out that part of it wasn't true, you swung completely to the other side and you missed the truth in between, because all of these people at all these different iterations happen to know the exact version of truth. They have the right interpretation. They had the right apologists and theologians that figured out just the right thing. And so it's very easy when I talk way over here on the pendulum about the fundamentalist side to ignore and excuse it as obvious ridiculousness, but it's still equally untrue as all of these other forms in between. So we will talk more about liberal, moderate Christianity or belief systems, interpretations, and metaphor, etc. This particular comment today does happen to be a little bit more on this spectrum over here with a very literal reading, but it's representative of a very large portion of believers. And this is especially harmful because when you believe way over here and your only sense of morality or truth comes from a very old and very incorrect Bible, it informs your actions, it informs your judgments, your biases, your politics, the way you interact in the world, and the way that your actions impact others. And that is my concern. That is my business. I've escaped from that thinking and I want to help others do the same. So when someone takes the time to list out a really long comment to me and I see so many errors and confusion, I just want to go point by point. I think it'll be interesting for those of you who aren't fundamentalists to kind of see what that thought is. And I think hopefully it'll be beneficial to some who are open-minded enough to maybe hear some rebuttals or retorts to what they believe if they happen to align with this certain kind of comment. I have it here on the screen, so I'm going to be looking down reading. I'll also put it up here for you guys, and we'll just go through it part by part. The first part here, and this is from Elijah, by the way, on my deconversion video. He says, I am not sure why you became an atheist, though. I watched the video, yes, but you stated some people's opinions. So you would rather believe those than believe God? I don't know exactly what you mean by I talked about other people's opinions and that I just believe those over God. I don't have God anywhere talking to me. The only aspect of God we have to believe over other people's opinions is his word. My main issue, and the main reason I deconverted, is because I read his word and I saw one of two things. First, I saw how impossible it was for this to be a source of truth. It got too many things wrong, too many contradictions, too many things that we have learned since in history, in science, etc., that make this not only outdated, but just incorrect in general. And two, even if we ignored all of that, the nature and character I saw of God made me say that even if he was real, he is not a God that deserves my love, worship, or adoration. But I think the opinions you're probably talking about are when I was searching and struggling with those two parts of the Bible that I found so irreconcilable, I turned towards the theologians of the past and of the present, the apologists, my pastors, my friends, my mentors, people that believed and had been in the faith for a long time. Most of them, by the way, tried to still keep me in the faith and tell me why I was wrong and things of this nature. And by the way, sometimes they were right. There were things I thought were contradictions that weren't, once you knew the context. But there were others that I simply could never excuse. There were things that I was confused about in God's character, and then through understanding a little bit of the time and place, etc., it was like, okay, I can kind of see that. And there were other things that just had no excuse. See the video on slavery. And so I didn't just believe other people's opinions over God. As much as I could, I wrestled to continue to try and still believe. And despite all of that, I came to what I consider to be the only conclusion available, which is that this Bible is not accurate. No more than the Quran that you don't believe in, no more than the Vedas that you don't believe in, no more than the old Greek myths that you don't believe in. And you don't believe in them for some reason, and you believe in this for some reason, and there just wasn't enough good reasons in this for me. That's it. That's all that it is. I'm not choosing man over God or anything like that. You're starting a lot of your assumptions and what we're going to go through with the fact that there is indeed a God and that he has done X, etc. And I'm not starting from that place. I'm seeing if that adds up. Otherwise, you're just a product of indoctrination. You're a product of your time and place. I don't mean to come off condescending and you're so wrong, you're so bad. I've believed most of these things that you state here at one point. I am just so happy that I'm free of it, and I'd want that for you. You go on to say, I have seen videos and interviews on the radio of people that went to Mount Ararat where Noah's Ark settled on, and they say the landmark is still there. We are just going to rapid fire through this as much as I can. Listen, there are so many more issues with the story of the ark if you are taking it literally. I would like, before we'd even consider this, for you to explain to me how freshwater animals still exist today if the whole world was covered and mixed in with the salt water, how the trapped animals on islands made it to the ark, how there was room, how everyone didn't die of methane poisoning, and the literally hundreds, if not thousands of other issues that make Noah's Ark a complete and obvious myth. This is something that in a fundamentalist cult, it is unbelievable that we still believe stories like this. This is ridiculous. But let's get to your claim. I know this claim very well because I used to want this to be so real too. It started in the 60s. The main guy involved is Ron Wyatt, who's not an archaeologist, even though he has claimed to be. He is a nurse anesthesiast, I believe. And there have been many other people and publications that have picked this up throughout the decades, and every once in a while the story kind of gets reiterated or they do a new scan. And again, non-scientific, non-archaeologist Christians try to promote this as fact, and it's not. Ron Wyatt himself said there were trainloads of gopher wood when he went. There is no gopher wood found on site. They have sent archaeologists. They have looked at the mineral composition of everything they found there. There was iron latches or brackets that they found. That was absolutely confirmed to be chemical compound makeups from volcanic rock. The entire picture, and I'll put the picture up for you. This entire area is just a rock formation. It's actually a pretty common rock formation. It's like looking in your milk and wanting to see a certain picture of a butterfly. Oh, I can kind of see how it would be a butterfly. If you looked at this without the context of Noah's Ark and Mount Ararat and the Bible saying that it landed somewhere in this vicinity, you probably wouldn't have seen a boat. This is not proof. Dig it up. Let's see a boat. Let's make it the actual exact parameters, but we can't have that because the cubit, which was what was used as the unit of measurement, varies from 16, 17 up to 20 inches, roughly, depending on a few things. And so when you extrapolate that into how big and wide the ark would have been according to the biblical narrative, you have a degree of difference that is huge. And yet all the Christians looking at Mount Ararat are like, that's the exact proportions listed in the Bible. No, it's not. There's so many issues here. It's just unbelievable. What every archaeologist who is actually an archaeologist who has said about the scene is it is a rock formation. Here's what it's made up of. Here's the consistency. We've looked at the chemical compounds and the mineral makeup, and here's what they are. I'm not an expert on archaeology or a lot of the other kind of scientific areas that we're going to have to cover going through your comments, but I can say I wanted this to be true myself. I did my research. I looked at both sides, and the Christian side is just woefully ignorant. Anyways, you tell me when there's a real ark sitting atop a mountain, and we can talk. Next up, Elijah says, we are the proof of God's existence because we are in his image. Have you ever thought of why your head is where it is, or why you have 2 feet and so forth? We are copies of God, the image of God. There's a lot of things wrong with this. First of all, it's a presupposition of a few things. One, that we know what God looks like. We have an accounting of God that has changed throughout the Bible. We also have an accounting of God's physical features pre-Hebrew Bible, when he was still El or El's son, or when he was still married, or all of the other things before we get to this particular canonized collection of what you have used to define your God. We also have God saying that some people saw him. We also have God saying no one can see him. But what you're assuming is that God was described with, for instance, a left and right hand, and we happen to have a left and right hand, and God said he made us in his image, so hey, here we are. But my viewpoint is that we as a people group who developed consciousness, the Homo sapiens, who happen to have a left and right arm, even though many species have multiple arms or no arms, etc., we made up this God. And of course, we made him look in our image. Like, let's say horse has developed consciousness. I bet they'd make a God with 4 legs. And then if 2,000 years later, a horse said, hey, that God has 4 legs. I have 4 legs. God must be real. Is not an argument at all. You're picking one species who made up a God and designed him and said, look, we're designed like him. No, we designed him. That's why he looks like us. Again, not evidence. Next up, we have one of my favorite ones, and this is one I definitely want to make a whole video on. You would rather believe there is a big bang and all of a sudden there's oxygen in the air that we can breathe and live, and then suddenly appeared and sits where it is and rain falls in its season. A big bang, and all of a sudden fruit started growing from nowhere, and those fruits have seeds in them that can be planted to produce more fruits of the same kind. Do you know that we humans also obey that very same principle? Just like fruits have seeds in them and those seeds can be planted to produce more fruits, we humans have our own seeds, sperm for men and ovum for women, that also come together to produce children that look like us. The same principle as the fruits and animals. You think that the so-called Big Bang did that? No, I don't think the Big Bang did that. The Big Bang, as we know it and can look back and has been proved by things like the cosmic microwave background, etc., is just the beginning of time. Now, there may have been something before it. There may be cycles. There may may be some eternal aspect. There may be something else going on. It's just the furthest back we can measure based off things like the temperature of space, the expansion of mass, traveling of light, etc. You also believe in a Big Bang. You believe in a Big Bang that was God said X and it was done. You have to take it a step further though. You have to say that God has always been or that God was created. Those are your only two options. And those are our only two options for the universe. Why go an extra step with God? The universe has either always been or it had a start. That's it. Those are the only two options. Those are your only two options for God. So all the issues you see with things randomly just happening, I see with God just randomly being there and then making things happen. Assigning a divine creator does not get you out of this issue of cause and effect. It just doesn't. It's all a mystery. You've filled the gap and claim knowledge you don't have. We are saying we don't know, but as far back as we can track, here's what happened. We don't understand abiogenesis, which is what you're trying to say, where life comes from essentially nothing, although that's not quite the case, and then has evolved, but we can see evolution. We have evidence of the lineage of evolution. That much is certain. How life formed in the first place is still a curiosity, and it would be the same curiosity of how God was formed in the first place. You saying it just is not an answer. And there's explanations for all of this once we get past those things that we don't know that you also don't know about reproduction and sexual selection and natural selection, kin treatment, and all of these things. That's fine. They're observable and they've been defined, and we can see it happening in some cases even right now. This is not a mystery. Evolution is not. The formation of the universe and of life, great. I'm with you. I don't know either, but I'm not going to claim I do because a book told me so that doesn't actually provide any answers to the very same mystery. I also want to say too, like, you believe that God just spoke it and then it was perfect. You're the one who believes that it just happened. Our planet was not ripe with oxygen for a long time. And when it did have oxygen, it didn't have the right ratio and levels of oxygen compared to other gases in the system, etc., to be able to house life. Earth has been around for 4-point-some billion years, and it has been uninhabitable to a species like us for most of that. And still most of Earth is uninhabitable without shelter or human craftsmanship, etc. And then most of the universe is extremely uninhabitable. So this whole idea of like perfect design is really ridiculous. Let's move on. What about your sense of morality and conscience? A Big Bang happens and all of a sudden we know it's wrong to steal and to kill and to do evil to other people. Really? If we all came from a Big Bang, lions and other predatory creatures would have the same morals and conscience as humans, right? So when a lion has a human for brunch, which conscience is it exhibiting? There are so many things wrong with that particular paragraph that I really just want to encourage you to go get a better foundation and understanding of evolution. We can talk about the morality part here in just a second, but talking about how if we all evolved at the same time, you're not even going to use the word evolved, if we all became at the same time from a Big Bang, then lions and humans would act exactly alike and have the same morality. No, our morality comes from our conscious awareness, which is something that to an extent lions don't have. Lions still work predominantly off of instinct. Now, it is theoretically possible that if lion brains continued to evolve and they develop the same level of consciousness that we have, one of them at some point might have an existential thought of, is it wrong to eat that lamb? It is our continued evolution past many of the other species that allows us to reason and have these quandaries and qualms that other animals seem not to have. So the other claim that you're trying to make, you're saying there's an objective morality, that it had to come from God, that he only gave it to humans, not other animals, and that's why we deal with if it's wrong to steal or murder and the lion does not. I understand that that is your point. Doesn't need a God to tell us that, and before your God laid out the 10 commandments, we still knew in many other societies what was wrong and what was right. And we can debate this all day. You can get into altruism and empathy and the reasons that this has evolved, even though we are predominantly selfish creatures, and that's what helped us evolve to this point in the first place. But eventually we got into large enough groups that we had to make friends and work and trade and deal to survive, and it created this sense of obligation to one's neighbors, etc., that really developed into the social norms and morality that we all have. Again, my biggest point about this would be that God does not display an objective morality. His morality is all over the place. He's killing babies for punishment. He's enslaving people. He's allowing people to be raped and then returned to their rapist. He is the author of genocide on multiple accounts. God has has his justifications for a lot of this, but a justification is not the same thing as morality. And if your morality comes from divine command theory, then that is what is really, really scary. And that is why fundamentalists are so scary. That is why abortion clinics get bombed. As soon as you have a holy reason to do something otherwise unholy, and I'm not saying that all Christians would just go blow up abortion clinics, but the abortion clinics that have been blown up have predominantly happened because of a belief that that is wrong, and that it is wrong because of God, which is hilarious because God is the greatest aborter of all time. And therefore it is justified to kill those doctors that are doing this harm. But I thought murder was never justified. Well, it's not murder if it's just, and it is not an unjust killing if they are sinning. And all of a sudden we have worked ourselves into one horrible batch. So you either believe one of two things if you believe in divine command theory or morality at a greater level. And we will definitely talk about this in a later video. And that is that things are moral or just because God did them, or God only does things that are moral or just. And you'd have to first figure that out, and then we can go down all of the different lanes of traffic. And if the Abrahamic God Yahweh is the God that gave us this objective morality, I can't begin to point out the inconsistencies and issues with it. On the issue of suffering, a lot of people forget that when they do wrong, there are repercussions in the future. What you're talking about is a natural consequence, and that can come in any way, shape, or form. We don't get to choose the repercussions. Also, there are parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents and other ancestors that have done so much evil to people in their days and have entered into demonic covenants. Never mind, natural consequences going out the window right now, and have entered into demonic covenants in the past that will hunt down family lines in the future. And when those things start playing out, you blame everything on God. A lot of people choose to reject God because God has principles and moral standards, but people want to do anything and everything they want and not feel guilty about their actions or be accountable. But if they choose to believe in God, they have to follow his truths and rules and commandments. But they don't want that, so they choose to block their minds from that and do what they want. But whether they believe it or not, like it or not, or want to hear it or not, God created this earth and everything in it, and therefore owns everything on this earth and the earth itself. Therefore, only he gets to set the rules and principles that govern what he created and owns. So whether anyone believes it or not, the truth and subsequent repercussions apply to everyone. All right. First of all, Elijah is not a one-off case. There are a ton of fundamentalists that agree wholeheartedly with you, and they are your neighbors, and they are in our community, and they are voting, and they are trying to make policy, and they are committing horrendous acts under this same kind of belief system. Let's break a couple of these things, though, down. So I was with you in the first half, or maybe the first eighth, where you talk about natural repercussions, and in a world without God, this is what we would expect. We would expect that if I go take something from my neighbor, something bad is going to happen. Either my neighbor is going to come take something from me, or my neighbor is going to come hurt me, or if we as a community and collective society have said if we don't want people taking things from each other, so we'll create some law and order, then I have to fear the natural consequence of the law and order coming after me for what I did wrong if they can prove it. And this is our world today. But then you went off the cliff and you started talking about people were demonically possessed and did so much harm that it is being passed down through what is called generational sin, is what's referenced in the Bible here that you're trying to talk about. And there's a ton of problems with that. One, why did God let anyone be demonically possessed? That is a choice that God made. That is another supernatural power inflicting on our free will. I thought the whole point was God gave us free will so we could choose him. If you've been demonically possessed, guess what? You can't have the free will to choose God or to get out of the possession or anything like that. And if God created the demons that can do that and the power he handed over to Satan and his horde, then that system is completely broken. And him choosing to punish generations of generations afterwards for the sins of the father is not only unfair and unjust, but completely ridiculous in premise. Your next main point was a lot of people choose to reject God because God has these principles and moral standards, and people want to do anything and everything they want and not feel guilty or be accountable. Do I want to follow some of those and not follow some of those? Yes. Do I need to deny God exists just so I can do so without feeling guilty? No. So I have been a Christian and I have felt guilty for sin, and I have felt both conviction, the Holy Spirit, and condemnation of the devil. If I didn't want to feel guilty, the best way would be to remain a Christian. God says, as a Christian, as a believer, when asking for forgiveness and truly repenting, that he will wipe your sins as far as the east is from the west. That's pretty far. And that's great. That is a surefire way to not feel guilty. Now, a lot of Christians still deal with a tremendous amount of guilt and shame because of all of the other implications from this horrendous book. But I, without God, have become fully responsible. I don't have a scapegoat. I don't get to blame the bad things in my life on demons. I am fully responsible for my life and how it affects other people around me. And I have messed up in my time of being a non-Christian. I have hurt people. I have said things that weren't true. I have gossiped. I have lied, just like I did all of those things when I was a Christian. But when I was a Christian, I could usually rationalize them or say it was for some greater good or just ask for forgiveness and feel better from God. As a non-Christian, bearing the full weight of the responsibility, when I mess up, I still care about it. It doesn't alleviate my care if I hurt my wife or I offend my children. I'm very affected by all of that, even without some God in the sky telling me to feel bad about it. And I want to make those things right because I want to have good relationship with my wife and my children and my neighbors and my friends. It's like you've never met a non-Christian, or you assume every non-Christian is some demonic rapist and murderer. People have been doing good things without God for a long time. Sometimes they also do bad things. Christians do good things in the name of God, and they do bad things sometimes just because, and sometimes in the name of God. See blowing up an abortion clinic. And so I get what you're going for here, but the premise is just completely flawed. You go on to say they choose to block him out from their minds because they want to do what they want, but whether they believe it or not, like it or not, or want to hear it or not, God created this earth and everything in it and therefore owns everything on this earth. This was the other point. You're okay. Like what this is this is a justification of if there are things that are God's problem, there is evil in the world that he allowed, but you have to believe. He says it in the Bible. He says, I created evil. He claims it. And also fundamentally, if you just think about the nature of God, he's the only thing and then everything else exists. If he's the only thing and then everything else came after he spoke it into creation, that means Lucifer, that means evil, that means demons, that means all of the things you're saying are not his problem, are his problem. And then you're excusing them as, well, he owns everything, he can do what he wants. That is so wrong. What you're insinuating is that God has a right to do whatever he wants because of his ownership. Now, it's obviously false that he owns everything or that he created everything or that he even exists. But within the incorrect confines that we've already have a belief in God, to say that he can do whatever he wants simply because he created us, apply that. Just continue the line of logic and reasoning, please. And let's have every parent be able to do whatever they want to all of their children. Like, just imagine if a parent acted like God. Imagine if a parent found a way to keep their children alive forever and then locked them in a basement and went down and tortured them every single day and then blamed it on the children not eating all their dinner or telling a fib or any of the things that children do because children are children, just like the things we do as people are because we are people, not because we are demonically possessed. It's just so sick to me. And I know that you don't see it that way. And I know that anyone else who believes the Bible in the way you do doesn't see it that way. But it's wrong and it's hurtful. And if God is the example, if he is the good father, this is the worst set example I've ever seen. It's this simple. God set up the rules. He created people because he says he wanted relationship with them, to be glorified through them, to receive glory from them, which is also really sick. And for that cause, he's going to create a system that puts most people that have ever lived for all time in hell forever. You believe this. You're okay with this. You're making excuses for it. And it's more offensive to me than just about any secular thing I've ever seen or heard in my entire life. What I think we ended up with today was a mini introduction to many topics that I definitely want to cover much more in detail in the future. I wasn't able to say everything. I wasn't able to give every defending point. There's a lot of things that went unsaid or unspoken by people that want to talk about objective morality and how I didn't get that right, or actually Abiogenesis looks like this and we do know X about it. I don't claim to be an expert in anything, but I have enough of a base here to be able to engage in a conversation about it, especially against such obvious incorrectness. So disclaimer, caveat, I'm going to point you here if you hit me hard in the comments. I want to have the time to properly address these things. I plan on doing so. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day. Please subscribe if you have not. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see in future videos, and I will see you on the next one.